Okay, tonight is Genesis chapter 12.
Now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So Abram departed, as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him, and Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran, and they went forth to go into the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan they came.
God has directed Abram to leave the area they were living in, which was considered actually kind of a wealthy area, right? So I mean that's kind of a good point to make. It kind of reminds me a little way of Lehi at the beginning of First Nephi, that he was living in Jerusalem in a nice house, and the Lord told him to take his family, go out into the wilderness, all right? He led him to a new land, a land of promise. Well, this is very similar, right? Where Abram is living in a nice area, and God tells him, okay, you're going to leave that area, right? It says, get out of this country, from thy kindred, from the father's house, unto a land that I will show thee, right? So I'm going to show you a new place to live, right? So you're going to even get away from your relatives and so forth, right? So the only one he's going to take is Lot with him, and of course his wife, right? So, but other than that, he's leaving all the rest of the family behind, with whoever's his friends were, the homeland and so forth. He's going to go somewhere. He says, I'll show you where to go. Okay? And, when God directs us to go somewhere, I mean, if we know it's God directing us, then that's a good thing, and you want to do what God's directing you. Right? We always ask God to show us the way to go. So when He shows you the way to go, then you want to take that advice. Okay, so notice the promises that are being made, though, in the second verse. It says, I will make of thee a great nation. He's telling Abram that out of you I'm going to make a large group of people, all right, a whole nation from you. Okay, in other words, going to have a large family, so that lots of descendants and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and so forth, all right? So that's what he's telling them. I'm going to make out of you a great nation. Now, what's the only issue with that? If you remember in the previous chapter, it pointed out that his wife was barren. Okay, she could not have children. So for Abram to hear this kind of promise, he really would have had to trust in God, because my wife can't even have kids, or she's not having any kids. So how am I supposed to have a great nation come out of me when I won't even have one offspring? Okay, so but having faith in God, he's willing to hear God's plan and say, well, yeah, if God said it, then it's gonna take place. And I had heard one time that even the name Abram had a certain meaning to it, right? The name Abram meant a father of many, right? So to me it was almost, I must have, if it was me, I would think it's almost like a mocking thing, right? Here his name is the father of many, and really he's the father of none. Okay, so but yet that was his name and what it meant. And here God made a promise that you'll be a great nation will come from you, right? He says, I'll bless you, make your name great. Okay, and he says, and you shall be a blessing. So like we teach sometimes here, right? It's not always about give me a blessing, right? Sometimes we can be a blessing to other people also, and so he's giving it both ways to Abram. He's saying, yes, you're going to be blessed greatly, but you're also going to be a blessing to many. So that's, of course, him and his large family, great nation, who he's wondering where they're going to come from, right? That they're going to be a blessing to many. Okay, in 3 it says, I'll bless them that bless you, curse them that curse you. In thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So this is a pretty big promise, really, if you think about it, right? That from you, all the families of the earth are going to be blessed. I mean, it's not your normal arrangement, right? That any one person and their relatives can affect the whole earth, but yet this is what he's telling Abraham or Abram, right? That's what's going to happen. So with all this instruction and all this promise from God, So that's why it says in the 4, so Abram departed, as the Lord had told him to, even though he was comfortable living in his home and he could have stayed there. He's okay, I'm going to do what the Lord said, I'm just going to follow him and go wherever he leads me. Right? So it says, so Abram departed, Lot went with him, Abram was 75 years old, right? And so they gathered some group of people and they headed for the land of Canaan, which was where God was directing them to go, right? A land called Canaan. And again, we just want to keep that name in mind for a little while also, because the name of that place comes up a little bit later on also.
And Abram passed through the land unto the place of Shechem, unto the plain of Moreh, and the Canaanite was then in the land. And the Lord appeared unto Abram, and said, Unto thy seed will I give this land. And there builded he an altar unto the Lord, who appeared unto him. And he removed from thence unto a mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, having Bethel on the west, and Hai on the east. And there he builded an altar unto the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed, going on still toward the south.
Right, so as Abram and the group are traveling, right, so in 6 it says they passed through the land unto the place of Shechem, okay, unto Moreh, and the Canaanite was then in the land, which tells me that this was part of the overall land of Canaan, all right, so they were coming into the area where that God had said he would show him where to go, the land of Canaan. And now, in addition to God saying he was going to show him this land, verse 7 it says, And the Lord appeared unto Abram and said, Unto thy seed will I give this land. Right, so your descendants are going to own this land. And so that's why Canaan then became known by a certain term, which was the promised land. Right, and the reason it was called the promised land was because it was promised to Abram's descendants. Right, so it was the promised land, and so later on in the scriptures, the promised land comes into play. All right, because they didn't actually really occupy that land for many hundreds of years later, right? Because the descendants of Abram were eventually in captivity. They were in captivity in Egypt, right? And then they were delivered by a man named Moses, led them out of Egypt, and they were headed for the promised land, right, which was Canaan. See, so when Moses took them out of Egypt, they crossed the Red Sea, and they journeyed finally to Canaan, which was the promised land, right? So when it's called the promised land, it's called that because here it was promised to Abram's descendants. So upon hearing this additional instruction from God and the promise, so it mentions that he builds an altar, calls on the name of God, and so he's basically giving thanks to God for what he's been told and for him bringing him through to this point, right? Because again, it's nice to hear that your family is going to be taken care of, so to speak, right? That the future of your descendants is secure because God has said so. So he's praising God for what he's been told.
And there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous in the land. And it came to pass, when he was come near to enter into Egypt, that he said unto Sarai his wife, Behold now, I know that thou art a fair woman to look upon. Therefore it shall come to pass, when the Egyptians shall see thee, that they shall say, This is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will save thee alive. Say, I pray thee, Thou art my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake, and my soul shall live because of thee.
So Abram and the group had reached the land of Canaan, which again we refer to as the promised land. But in verse 10 it says there was a famine in the land, in other words, a shortage of food. So therefore, it says Abram went down into Egypt to look for a place where there was more food. So they departed the land where God had brought them to go into Egypt. Now, I mean, whether God would have provided for them if they stayed there, it's hard to say, but the point is that they were hungry, it was a famine, so they went to Egypt, right? But now, as they traveled to Egypt, and Abram had a certain concern, a certain worry here. I tend to think of Sarai as an old woman, right? Then Abram was 75 years old, so I'm guessing maybe she was 65, right? So, but yet, he says that, he was concerned because he says she's a beautiful woman, right? So if we go into Egypt, there's going to be men who want to have her, and the only thing standing between having her and not is me, because I'm her husband. So he's thinking, they won't hesitate to kill me, right? And then this way, then she's available. So he's afraid that they're going to kill him to get her. So he says, all right, how about we change things up a little bit, all right? Just, I'll go there and I'll introduce you as my sister. So this way, nobody will want to kill me to get you. Okay. But I mean, still, you would think, if you think it through, well, then what does that really mean? Is he's willing to have them take her anyway, right? But just not kill him, right? So again, it's a little bit of a lack of judgment and faith here, right? But that was what we told her. He says, well, I'm going to tell everybody that you're my sister. This way, nobody kills me to get you. Okay, so that's what he tells her as they're headed into Egypt.
And it came to pass that when Abram was come into Egypt, the Egyptians beheld the woman that she was very fair. The princes also of Pharaoh saw her, and commended her before Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And he entreated Abram well for her sake, and he had sheep, and oxen, and he-asses, and men-servants, and maid-servants, and she-asses, and camels.
So when they arrived in Egypt, right, it says, sure enough, it said that the Egyptians looked at her and they thought she was a beautiful woman. Okay? But now they were being introduced to her as Abram's sister. So in 15 it says the princes of Pharaoh, or the king, saw her and said, hey, this would be a good wife for the king. All right? So they went ahead and brought her to Pharaoh. It says it commanded her before Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. So it says that he treated Abram, entreated Abram well for her sake. Right? He gave him all kinds of stuff. He gave him animals and and so forth. Right? Because he said, I think your sister is beautiful. Right? So yeah, so I want her. So here, you're her brother. Here, have all this stuff. All right? And I'll make you nice and wealthy, and then I'll take your sister to be my wife. And so this is what's happening, because he introduced her as a sister. So now it's snowballing from here, right? Now the Pharaoh wants her for a wife, and he's giving him stuff and saying, here, I'm really glad to have met your sister. I'm really glad you brought her here, because now I'd like to take her for my wife.
And the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this that thou hast done unto me? Why didst thou not tell me that she was thy wife? Why saidst thou, she is my sister, so I might have taken her to me to wife? Now therefore, behold thy wife, take her and go thy way. And Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away, and his wife, and all that he had.
With the Pharaoh taking Sarai into his house, right? It said that God was not pleased with that. So now it says the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of that, because he was taking her in as his wife. So I mean, the Pharaoh is not the bad guy here, right? I mean, he was told this woman was available, and so he brought her into his house to be his wife. And now his home is getting plagued and whatever, and God's sending down the plagues and punishments down, and he's like, what's going on? And so now, it doesn't say how he figured out what was happening, but somehow he figured it out. All right, in 18 it says Pharaoh called Abram and said, what have you done to me? All right, why didn't you tell me that she was your wife? So he says, why did you say she's my sister? So that now I'll take her to be a wife and so forth. You messed me up here. You got me in trouble even with God. God's sending down plagues on my household because of you, because you lied to me. So you think about that. I mean, a simple, you think, well, gee, sometimes maybe just a little lie here or there, a little cover up is okay, right? Well, you see what it turned into, right? Here is the Pharaoh's whole household is getting plagued because Abraham lied to him and said that this was his sister and not his wife. So finally he says, so here's your wife. Take her, take your whole people and get out of here, right? Leave town. And so that's what he said in 20. Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him. They sent him away and his wife and all that he had. Take whatever you have, maybe, I guess even including the stuff that he gave him. Just go, right? we don't want any more plagues here, and we don't really want this kind of trouble. If you would have just told me she was your wife, everything would have been good, but you told me she was your sister, and now you got me in trouble with God. So just take your wife, take everything, and go. See, Abraham, was, or Abram/Abraham was, known for his great faith and so forth, all right? But this shows the human side, that here, obviously, he feared for his life, and so he figured, we'll just make a little white lie here, and it'll be okay, and then you see what it turned into.